Rachel Solis San Martin, what are your earliest recollections of my father and your father being together?
Um, I remember a trip to Fort Worth when your dad first went to living in Fort Worth, and he had an apartment there. And we made a trip to Fort Worth to see him because my dad had to see his brother. And all five of the kids went. So all of us were there. I remember his apartment. He had a beige sofa. I remember sitting on the sofa and we all sat down and he was taking pictures of us. And then my sister Diana was playing on the steps going down. He must have been on the second floor and fell and just kind of face first, and she had this big old scrape, and your dad was so sympathetic with her and cleaning it off, and she was crying in the whole bit, but he was so good. I remember that.
Love it. What stories do you recall your father mentioning about early Laredo and the Solis clan tribe growing up together?
Yeah. I think that your dad and Tio Rene were so much younger than my dad. He left the house, he got into the Air Force early, maybe 19, at the age of 19. And so I don't think he grew up with them as much as he did with Tio Pancho, Tio Neto. And I remember he would say it was a small house and they all slept in one room, parents in one room and the kids in the other room, maybe separated by a curtain, and then using the outhouse, a real outhouse.
That's wild to think about that.
Yeah,
I had to literally walk outside of their house to go to the restroom in another building.
Right. But he more spoke about his older brother, or the brothers that were like in his age. And my Tia Sofia, his older sister, she and Tio Juan were my godparents. So I got to know them pretty well. And Tio Neto and Tio Pancho were always around, Tio Neto in Laredo, but Tio Pancho was here in San Antonio, and so we grew up with those cousins, Nina and Cindy and Juan, and then the older cousins, Lulu and Emma and Bobby. So, but in terms of stories about Laredo itself, it was just the trips that we made, and he made sure to go see his parents once or twice a month.
Really?
He'd take us all, and we all went down there. And so we brushed up on our Spanish and that kind of stuff.
Rachel, I never had an opportunity to really know my grandparents. I remember visiting our Aurora Solis grandmother, and at that point she was dealing with dementia. So I really never had a conversation with her at all. But what do you remember about them and their personality traits?
Well, my grandfather, Papa Pancho, was very strict. I remember we didn't want to upset him in any way, and so we were always on our best behavior when we went there. But he sat around and enjoyed the family. I don't remember too much of him speaking. But your grandmother, Mama Aurora, was very witty. She was very witty, and she had all these sayings. And Tia Luz knew all those sayings, and I don't know that she wrote them down, but they were so applicable to life. And there's a lot of them, there was no translation into English. You just lost the meaning if you tried to translate it. But she was very witty. And I remember her cooking was delicious. Her rice, her tortillas, always corn tortillas. Her cabrito, she was always in the kitchen. I remember her apron. Yeah.
What was her personality type like, and how do you think it influenced the different children? Like, where would you, like in 2025, would you say, wow, her personality traits I could see in this sibling and that other sibling? Does anything come to mind?
I got to know Tia Luz the best. So a lot of what Tia Luz followed, and even her religious affiliation, and her close connection to God, I think came from her mother, and she always referred back to her mother. Mm-hmm. So I saw that in Tia Luz. I didn't get to know Tia Beba too well. It was, we would go see her at gyms when she was working,
yep.
Or if she came to the house to visit, we got to know her a little bit, but I didn't see too much of the personality connections. I saw a lot of that in my dad and in Tia Luz, mostly. And then your dad and Tio Rene, well, they were always working or, not living in San Antonio. And so I didn't get to know that part of it. Did you see a lot of your dad or you didn't get to know?
Yeah,
Aurora?
I never got to know her at all, but the stories about the dichos and the sayings, and you think to yourself, here's a woman who probably did not have a lot of formal education in
Right.
terms of modern day times, but that wisdom and knowing all these dichos and being able to essentially mold the children by
Yes.
sayings, that's powerful stuff.
Yes. And I remember going to Laredo, and we would walk to the center of town from where she lived. And we'd go to the movies, or we'd go just sit in the plaza and enjoy a raspa or something, That way the adults had time to visit and the kids were out and about. But it was so safe. You could do that back then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, our fathers were part of the silent generation. That this would be before the baby boomers and right after the greatest generation. And those men, our fathers, were not, in my opinion, big talkers. Why do you think they had that quality?
I think their father was like that. I think Papa Pancho was like that. He wasn't a big talker. And when he spoke, he said something. He meant something. And so I think that might have been a trait that they picked up. Tio Neto was very outspoken. He was always telling jokes and joking with the kids. And, I remember he was very funny. He was always trying to make us laugh and just entertain. That was my Tio Neto.
So as adults, as my father moved here in the 90s and y'all had been here for decades, what kind of relationship did your father and my father have when they would see each other, etc.?
Oh, yeah. They were, your dad was so intelligent. You knew that. My dad was too, but he was so quiet about it. And he taught me a lot. My dad taught me so much, not just academics, but common sense. And so I was telling somebody a story yesterday about how my dad would be watering the grass, and I'd go outside with him just to spend time with him, and I'd say, Dad, can I water the grass? And he'd say, yes, but I'm going to stand here and watch you, just to make sure I was doing it right. And during those times of watering the grass, he would teach me stuff, just common sense stuff, like how do you wash your car? Don't forget, you start from the top and you go down, And so things like that, and things about the dogs and the dogs' personalities and what I should expect from our pets and things like that. So I remember the intelligence between them. They would have conversations that I didn't understand, and I was young and I probably saw myself out of it. But they were always very respectful to each other and each other's wives. The wives meant a lot in the family. And so, I remember that mutual respect.
And it seemed like that joy of life when they would be together, it was like endless laughter and endless jokes. And you just think, they were dealing with a lot of issues out there having to do with raising children as middle class individuals, but they still seem to laugh so much. I always admired that.
Yeah, they did have a lot of fun. And it was always, though, the adults were over here and the kids were over here. So what their conversations were about, I really couldn't tell you. But like you say, there was a lot of laughter and there was a lot of love in the family. There was a lot of unity. And they made sure to see each other, as much as they could. So, yeah.
Rachel, in reference to family structure and hierarchies, one family member told me that they recall that when the Solises would have dinner, it was the men would get served first, they would eat, and then the children would eat, and then the women would eat after that. What did you experience in that realm?
Yeah, I remember that clearly. I remember the women were the last ones to eat, and they would sit down and at the very end, and probably to a cold meal. And so my mom was raised that way, and she raised me that way. It isn't always that way anymore. I know that my brothers, Maybe Veronica with Javier does do that.
Yeah.
But Raul, no, he served his wife. So, things did shift. And I think also going back to the raising of the families, they were Hispanic men living in a white world, in a white man's world. And so I think they dealt a lot with that. And as intelligent as they were, I can't help but think how they were left behind, how they were pushed aside because of their race. And I know Dad was involved with a group here in San Antonio that had class action lawsuit against Kelly Air Force Base because he had his degree and white men were being promoted to higher levels without a degree, and he had his degree. So they did go all the way to the Supreme Court, but they lost. But they did fundraisers for to pay the attorneys and so forth. But it was real. It was real back then, as it is now.
Yeah. And how did your father's military experience influence him and change him?
Dad was so proud of his military time. He taught us all the songs, the Air Force song, the Army song, the Marine song, the Navy song. He used to sing them to us. I remember them. And so there's a medley out there, and he would just go into the next song. He was very proud of his Air Force career and what he learned and what he continued to learn because he kept going to school. And there was a time, I think the year that your dad graduated from college, my dad got his degree. So it took my dad 8 years to get a 4-year degree because he went to night school.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And what did he study, Rachel?
My dad's degree, I'm not sure, maybe logistics.
Okay.
Some kind of strategic. My dad was very into strategic and logistics.
Now let's talk about the great love story between your mother, Tia Gloria, and your father. How did the two of them meet?
They were neighbors.
Really?
Yeah. They grew up on the same street, maybe across the street from each other.
And for context, this would have been Couples and 35 in that area?
No, they were in Laredo.
Oh, they were in Laredo.
They grew up in Laredo as neighbors. Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
So my grandmother knew your grandmother. They were good friends.
Fabulous.
Yeah,
Just
they were good friends.
So they met in Laredo because they were neighbors. And how did they end up eventually marrying and ending up in San Antonio?
Then by that time, my grandparents, my mom's family, moved to San Antonio, and she graduated from Edgewood High School. My dad was still in Laredo at Martin High School. Then he went into the Air Force and kept in touch with letters and visits, and whenever he came down to Laredo, he'd come to San Antonio to see her. An interesting story is that when Mom was very sick, Javier was cleaning out her closet and stuff, and he told her, Mom, I found all your letters from Dad. And she said, don't read those letters, they're not for you. So he said, okay, he put them away, left them in the closet, and so forth. But then when Dad died, they thought, what are we going to do with all these letters? He put them in Dad's coffin.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Outstanding. Respecting her wishes, and it was between them.
We knew that, and we knew the love they shared.
I've had one family member say, a non-Solis, that when they married into the Solis family, it was like chaos, right? There was so many people, so many kids.
Yeah.
Was there a cultural shift for your mother marrying into the Solis family? That is, there were so many of them and so loud, or was any...
No, I don't think so. Mom came from a large family herself. I think there were 7 or 8 kids, so it was normal. It was normal to have 5 kids. It was, many of her sisters had 3 or 4 or 5 kids. Yeah, it was part of life.
So those years growing up in San Antonio and then going to Laredo is almost like 2 mixed worlds, right? Because Laredo is a whole other place, right? And San Antonio is clearly a large... So you were like living between 2 worlds, but when you were going back to Laredo, did you feel like, oh, this is like the old world, or did it feel like going to Mexico?
Yeah, it did. It did feel like going to Mexico, where 5 cents went a long way, and you could get more for your money, and also the food. We we ate Mexican food, authentic Mexican food, and we ate and we saw, you know, the dress that, you know, my mom wore an apron only when she didn't want to get her clothes stained, but my grandma wore an apron for every meal. She was always wearing her apron. And the Spanish, you know, you were in a different world. You were immersed into another culture.
Wow.
Yeah.
And coming from San Antonio to Laredo, did you like fully embrace it, or did you feel like no, that's really for them, but I'm modern, I'm different? Was there any kind of like?
No, I really embraced it. I really embraced the language. Learned a lot of, you know, Spanish from mom and dad, and if I didn't know a word, I'd call her and ask her, you know, how do you say this, or what does this mean, or what's the right phrase to say, whatever. And so I was immersed in everything, and I still love the Hispanic culture. Yeah.
Love it. In reference to growing up in the 80s and the 90s and also in the 70s, right? Was there something about like the whole Solis tribe? Because I remember the get-togethers. We do them at either Tio Lucy's house or Tio Pancho's house, and the family would get together. What are your memories of like all of these different cousins and all these different groups?
Yeah, I remember just taking off with the cousins and playing. You know, I don't remember what games we played, but we always played. We were always outside. Yeah. We'd also go to the park and meet them at the park. And I remember also, Dad and Tio Pancho lived paycheck to paycheck. And so when Dad ran out of money, he'd borrow it from Tio Pancho. And then when Tio Pancho needed it, he'd borrow it from Dad. And if their paychecks were on different schedules, it worked best because they could borrow from each other and then pay back. And they would find bargain stores, and they'd buy in bulk, and then they'd tell each other, and then so we'd go. And a lot of times Nina and I were wearing the same dress because they found it on sale. And so they tell each other, and then they'd go to the stores, and there we were. And all of a sudden I could see Nina wearing my dress, you know.
Isn't that incredible? You know, for my father's 80th birthday, I told the story about my very few interactions with Tio Pancho, and one of them was going to Foley's and finding the 75% off section because he knew where to find these insane bargains. Yeah. And when he showed me his trunk, he said, I'm stockpiling stuff. So I always am ready for birthdays, anniversaries. So it was such a big lesson for me that now it's making sense, because when you come from this humble beginning, from a humble lifestyle, every cent really matters.
Yes.
And the concept of them helping each other out, that's powerful.
I'm surprised you didn't know that story.
I didn't know that story at all.
I wonder if Cindy and Juan would remember that. I know Nina knew, you know, she was older, so.
And that relationship between your father and Tio Pancho, would they hang out together, or were they like buds?
Yeah. We were always either over there or they were over here, and they'd buy a cabeza de barbacoa, and they'd share, you know, we'd share it with them and split it. And so the families were always seeing each other, you know. But it was like that also on the other side, on the Luna side, on Mom's side of the family too. We had a lot of cousins and a lot of get-togethers, you know. But it was always good to see my cousin Elda, and we didn't see you guys. You know, we lost track of you guys for a while. And Tio Pancho's kids, and yeah.
And your Super Bowl parties are just legendary because there's so much love and there's so much emotion with food brought in by different party members. And I love seeing your parents just cherish those moments where they were just like in the thick of things. And your mom, you know, knew the numbers, and she was good at it. And I was always like, God, how do they know so much?
Yeah. Mom and Dad were always big football fans. You know, I remember we would sit and watch the Cowboys on Sundays. And that was his team. That was my dad's team when Tom Landry was coach. I don't think he feels the same way right now, but that was his team. And so I grew up watching the Cowboys, and I'm a ride or die Cowboy fan. So
the dynamic between your father and your mother, how did they manage a household with limited resources and still keep everyone happy? Because that must have been a challenge, because you were probably surrounded by people that maybe had this, that had that. Like, what did they instill in you in terms of this is who we are, this is what we're about. What lessons do you remember?
Mom was always a budget shopper. She really was. She'd buy in bulk, or I remember thinking, when can I just have a tube of Crest and not a generic FedMart toothpaste? I remember, and she always bought generics. Now I do the same. But at the time, I remember thinking, I just want a real toothpaste or a real, whatever. And so raising 5 kids on a budget, she didn't work. She raised us, and they put us through Catholic school.
Incredible.
Yeah, from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. We were in Catholic schools. The only one that didn't stay in a Catholic school was David, because he needed more help in his education. And so the Catholic schools couldn't provide that one-on-one that he needed, or the special programs or whatever, because he had dyslexia. He was dyslexic.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So at HEB, where he worked for many years, I get the impression that he was able to be successful in that environment because he was able to focus on so many different things. Because he was beloved. I mean, I know people that even know him and went over there and said, "Oh my God, that's David. He's your cousin."
Yeah. He worked as a cashier, and he ended up getting fired because his till was constantly off. And then Dad wrote a letter to the management and said, this isn't the job for him, but he doesn't need to get fired. He's got dyslexia. And so what you see as 81 cents, he sees as 18 cents. And so they reinstated him, but they put him in a different department. So he worked stocking shelves, and then he went into I think his big love was in the produce department. And so he worked there for many years in the produce department until he just couldn't do it anymore. He was carrying big crates of fruit and stuff like that. But yeah, Dad fought for him. Dad knew how to write a letter, that's for sure.
It's stunning to think that the amount of discipline it takes to be a stay-at-home mom for 5 kids and to send all of you to those schools, with the exception of David because of his situation. That took a lot of discipline. I mean, now you just think, who does that anymore?
Yeah. No, it was a goal for them, or they gave us that advantage. So yeah, we had a great foundation academically as well as Christian, our Catholic faith. So
talk about that in terms of your Catholicism and their Catholicism. Were they very active in the church? Would they go to church on Sundays? What was like their protocol for that?
They would go to church, but they sent us on our own. I'm not sure when that started, what age we were, but I remember walking to church, 3 or 4 of us walking to church and then coming back with our receipt, the bulletin.
Really?
We say we went to Mass. Because it would have been easy not to show up.
Yeah.
And I don't know how old we were when we started going on our own. And then they kind of fell back, but we'd go. And then I know when I got married at St. John Birchman, they started going again. Then, we were all out of the house, but there they were every Sunday going to church and participating in church things and knowing people in the church community and so forth. Yeah.
On a daily basis, how did their Catholicism come out during a regular day? Did they have crosses? Did they have was there certain prayers? How did you grow up, and how did that Catholicism play out?
My grandmother on my mom's side, my Mama Fina, was very Catholic, and when she got sick, she had lymphoma. She spent a lot of time with us, and she was the one that was always praying the rosary. So we knew we had our faith, and then in Catholic school we had certain things that we had to do. I was always hanging out with the nuns, and I started teaching CCD at a very young age. I think I was like in 7th or 8th grade when they asked me, "Hey, do you want to teach CCD?" And I said, "Sure." Well, where did they teach? The Teresian sisters taught at San Jose Mission. So mom would drive me, or dad would drive me all the way to San Jose Mission, leave me there. Then I taught the CCD class. Then I went to mass. Then they'd pick me up 2 or 3 hours later. And imagine the commitment to take one child all the way over there every Sunday, in addition to 5 days a week of driving all the way to St. Teresa's, with the rest of the clan, but on Sunday. And they kept that commitment. And today I'm still a CCD teacher.
Fascinating.
So, yeah, they supported us in whatever.
That leads to my next question. The Luna and the Solis family values, how did those play out as you were raising your own family?
Oh, it was always family. It was always family events, birthdays. My daughter knows her cousins on the Luna side more because they were more her age, and we lived in the vicinity, and we all went to the same church, which was St. Rose of Lima. But it was always, weddings. Kids always went to weddings, and then at some point, no children allowed, But the kids always went to weddings, and we would always say, hey, mom would say, or dad would say, let's go to Kelly Park. And so we were at the park almost every Sunday. In fact, they renamed it to Solis Park, or Luna Park, depending on, who went. And so it was always unifying. And I know my mom's nieces and nephews very well, all of them.
I have to say, I have endless admiration the times that I've attended your Easter picnics over here on Huebner Road. That family unity, whether it's playing games, bringing food, there's just so much love. It's so intense. It's like a whole other level.
Yes.
And I've always picked that up and had endless admiration for how your tribes just work so beautifully together.
Yeah. And we do family reunions. In fact, I'm on the family reunion committee this year for October. We have our big Luna Fajardo, because it was the Luna that married Fajardo, our great-grandparents. And it goes back that far. And so I'm meeting cousins and young cousins that are just ready to get involved, which is pretty great, pretty awesome. And so our last Solis family reunion, did you get to go to Wimberley?
I don't know. I don't believe so. That was 3 years ago?
It was before Tia Luz died. It was,
okay, it was longer.
No, it was longer than that.
Yeah.
So she said, we need a family reunion.
That's right. I remember that.
And so Cindy was on the committee, Irma Pina, myself, Cindy represented that family. I don't remember who else, but yeah, I mean, Luz was the one that would get it together. I think her daughter-in-law, Lauren, what's his wife's name?
Isabel.
Isabel.
Yep, Isabel.
And then Luz got Lauren and Philip involved in, doing stuff. So yeah, we need to do that again. We need to have a Solis family reunion.
Absolutely. Rachel, I wanted to ask you, when you look back, are there certain family members that have certain skills, traits that only later in life did you find out, oh my God, this person can sing, oh my God, this person can do this, or that person went where? Anything come to mind as far as unique, funny stories?
No, I mean, we've always known Juan is the politician and very well spoken in his speech and in his writing, and I can admire that 100%. Very articulate. And Cindy's funny, but also she's great at the computer. When we were having that family reunion meeting, she just got on her cell phone and sent out a save the date, and it was a flyer. Really nicely done. I go, how did you do that? I do it every day at work. So that kind of skill, I can admire. I'm kind of computer illiterate, so. And you see Emma and Bobby. I see Bobby and his wife at every first Friday at St. Matthew's for the noon mass, and they do anointing of the sick or the healing mass, and I see them there every first Friday.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So it's great to see that, you just say a quick hello and a hug, and that's all it takes, when you're in mass and you're on the same track, you're on this, your focus is the same. So that's pretty awesome.
one family member had talked about either Solis gene being strong or this, that, or the other. If there is a Solis gene in terms of looks, personality, style, for a person who wouldn't know because they're outside of our tribe, would you say, you know what, over time, at this age in my life, this is what I would identify as either a Solis trait, look, etc.? Anything come to mind?
I'm not sure. Maybe family values, keeping the family together, staying together, reuniting periodically. I can't think of anything in particular.
What about the generation, and I'm referring to our children and our grandchildren, for those of us that have grandchildren, do you think there will be that type of unity, that type of connection moving forward, or do you see it maybe more on the Luna side? What's your take on that?
I think, like, my children don't know your children. There's a lot of distance between them. And for a long time, I didn't even know Carlos's son and daughter's name.
Fascinating. Yeah.
So my children don't know them.
Yeah.
They don't know your children. I see a big separation. How that happened or why that happened, I'm not sure. But on the other side of the family, on the Luna side of the family, my daughter knows Adela's children or Angelica's daughter. Facebook helps a lot with that. But I think also it's making the time to get together.
Yeah.
And it was so great to see so many people, so many of the cousins at your dad's funeral.
Yep.
And it was so good to, get that family photo.
Yeah.
So I was just going to tables and saying, if your name is Solis or ever has been Solis, I need you on that wall. So it was really, really very, very special. Very special time.
Early on, I was always amazed by our Solis family members being, and I don't mean this word in a bad way, but like obsessed with pictures. Like there was always this, we need to capture the moment. We need to capture this picture. And I always thought it was curious because I really never went through it on my maternal side. Where do you think that obsession or love for we need to take pictures together, where did that come from? Was there one family member who said, no, we must take pictures? Because
I don't know. I know my mom was a big picture collector. We had about 7 or 8 big bins of photo albums and loose pictures. And she always had a camera and she was always developing films. And, back then you couldn't see what the picture looked like and you would just hope that it came out great.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I remember, pictures are a big part of who we were. And going back and recollecting those memories, because you forget. But I remember seeing pictures at Emma's wedding, Emma and Cuco, their wedding, and my padrinos, and then I have this little picture here of the Solis when we were sitting on Mama Aurora's porch.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so you've probably seen it, but it was all the little cousins,
Oh, I've never seen this picture before.
Yeah.
So tell me about this picture, Rachel.
So this is, let me see if I can find a date.
That's incredible.
I don't know. So this is Nina, this is Raul, this is myself, this is Lydia Michelle with her doll. And we're all about the same age. There's not much to be said for the haircuts. But, who took the picture? It had to be an adult.
Yeah.
I don't know who encouraged it. And I don't know who this person is back here. It could have been our grandfather. I don't know.
That's just amazing. I love that picture. So the child on the very far right, the hair is very light. So growing up, was there ever comments like el güero, el morenito? Yeah. Like, how did that all play out?
Yeah. Lydia, Michelle, and Curtis, they were the white kids, and still today they don't look like the family. I guess Lydia looks a little bit like her mom, in the facial features, but they don't look like typical Solises,
If possible, Rachel, tell me about the connection between Tia Sophia and your father, and because they were obviously step siblings, right? What kind of connection did those two have, and the other family members?
My dad had a great love for his sister. They are my godparents, and we would see them every time we went to Laredo. And I would spend summers with Tia Sophia and the girls, Yolanda and Emma and Idma. I'd spend time with them, and if they went to school, my sister and I would stay there playing in the yard. I remember a big old tree with all the seeds falling. And Tia Sophia constantly sweeping the porch and keeping everything clean. She was just a very meticulous housekeeper. And so everything was, just pristine in her home.
And what about the connection between Tia Sophia and her mother, our grandmother, Aurora Solis? What kind of connection did they have?
I really don't know. I couldn't tell you. I was probably too young to even be interested in that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
In terms of, for us, Generation X, and I don't, you probably, are you a baby boomer? Are you in that category?
No, just under them, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for us as Generation X members, how do you think we should preserve these ideas, values, and beliefs moving forward? Because you, if I'm not mistaken, have grandchildren, right?
I do.
What is your hope for them to understand where they come from?
I think for me, first and foremost is my faith. To continue the Catholic religion in them, because I think it's gotten me such a long way, and it hasn't been a hard life. We've experienced stuff, but with the death of my husband, my faith got me through. Because I know that there's something better for him than what we know here on this earth, and that eternal life is with God. So my faith, and I want them to have that faith to make them strong and to make them believe that humanity is worth fighting for.
Love it. As we speak, behind you, I see the beautiful Japanese dolls and the artwork. And one of the things that I think is so impressive is that your parents were world travelers, and they had a lot of really cool experiences over the years.
They did. We were young when they were traveling, but then they traveled on their own, and my grandma would take care of us for a week or whatever it was that they traveled to, however long they traveled. And they would bring us back little souvenirs and stuff. And sometimes they'd talk about the stories, but not too often, but we knew they loved to travel, and we knew Mom was always ready to go. And in that perspective, it reminds me, so the last trip that they took, Dad had already began a little bit of dementia, so we really had to watch him. They went to Alaska. My husband and I took him to Alaska, and we went on a cruise, and Mom started off walking real slow, but with all the walking she had to do to keep up with us, she did really well, and came back walking up a storm. And David said, "You got to keep her doing that, keep her walking." And she loved it. And my mom didn't know a stranger. She would just talk to anybody and make friends with anybody in the group or the tour bus or whatever we were. She just always knew stuff about people because she talked to them.
Yeah. And she had this way of being able to, when you communicated with her, like she was in the moment, like she was present. And I remember having a conversation with her at a Super Bowl party, at one of your Super Bowl parties, and it was during this important time during the game, and she still made me feel like I was the only person in that room, and that's a skill that nobody really has nowadays.
Yeah. Instead of looking at the phone or looking at the TV, or she just, if you were talking to her, she'd talk to you. Yeah. Sure. And she'd listen. Yeah.
Outside of raising families and being interested in football, did your parents have any certain hobbies or things that they'd like to do that like most people wouldn't know about?
Oh, well, everybody knew they liked to dance, so they were always looking for dances.
Fascinating.
Yeah, even when we were little, they'd take us to a festival, a church festival, because they had a band, and they were able to dance. And so they were always looking for dances. They liked that. And of course, the travel thing, they liked to travel. And they liked they like to visit family. We're going over to your Tia Vicky's, or we're going over here. Do you want to go? Yes, no, maybe. So when we were little, of course we had to go. But as we grew up into teenagers, they gave us that choice. Or they meet at the bubble room. Do you remember that? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember
Okay,
that.
so there was a little dive bar, like MK Davis, and they'd meet their Tio Pancho and whoever, my Tio Juan, and they'd all go to the bubble room and have a beer on a Friday night, a beer and a burger. Yeah.
That's
And then we'd go to the drive-in. They'd take us to the drive-in. So we had a lot of drive-in days.
your children, your parents' grandchildren. That must have been a treat for them because they grew up being able to experience their grandparents.
They really did. They knew them well. And they can still laugh at the different things that my dad or my mom would say, They still, they remembered them well because they grew up. And so summers they spent with mom and dad.
Really?
As well as Raul's kids. So Stephen and Daniel were there, and 3 or 4 days a week, and then my kids were there, and they knew my parents very well. My parents knew them.
What a great legacy for that generation, because you don't see that happening a lot in 2025,
Right?
because people are so distant. But what a treasure for your children and all of the grandchildren to have grown up with them, seen them values, and just experience them.
Yeah, experiencing their personalities. And my dad was funny, and he loved them. He loved the kids. I have pictures of my dad holding my daughter right up there on the shadow box. I don't know if you saw the shadow box. That was mom's.
Really?
Yeah, the shadow box mirror. And they all have something of my parents in their home. So my son has my dad's flag because he served, in the Air Force. So when he passed away, they presented the flag to my son.
Awesome.
Because he's military. He's the only grandson that's military. He's in the Army.
Outstanding.
Yeah. And then, my daughter has a jewelry piece or a bowl, or, there was a beautiful Christmas bowl that she wanted. She got it. So, yeah, they treasure those things, and they treasure the memories and the pictures, so.
We, on my dad's side, because Theo Rene and my father were the younger ones, we were obviously late.
Yeah.
To just about everything. But I feel like my dad really excelled being a grandfather. He loved it.
That was one of the things that we saw in your dad. I saw. He was so proud of his grandchildren. He talked about his grandchildren more than he talked about you guys.
I agree.
Yeah. And so it was always very nice to see Maggie and Melanie at the house with you and getting to know them. They were shy.
Yeah.
They were shy, but they came. So, yeah.
And he drove them to school for years.
So they got to know him pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And he would he pick them up?
Yes, he would pick them up every morning. And so my mom and father essentially lived in the 78230 zip code, which would be Wurzbach and Eiton West. So my father would drive to 1604 in Bandera, which is a 20-minute drive.
Wow. Yeah.
During certain high school years. And part of me feels like he loved getting out of the house, but he just loved being able to serve.
Yeah.
And being able to do something where he felt like I'm making a contribution.
And he was helping you guys out.
Mm-hmm.
He was helping you out, and at the same time spending time with his children, his 2 granddaughters. Yeah.
And one of the stories that Melanie tells my oldest daughter is that how my father started taking Melanie to McDonald's, and my mom found out that they were playing hooky, and that put it to an end. So it was little things like that, my father reveled in, right?
Yeah.
It's how can I make this experience just a little better?
Yeah. Exactly.
And I feel like your father had that same, in Spanish they say toque, right? How can I just make your situation just a little better?
Yeah, and he did that with a lot of humor. Dad wasn't a man of very many words, but when he spoke, it was funny, or it was very relevant to what was happening. And he was, he loved making the kids laugh, And when my daughter was little, he would walk up to her like this, all kind of crooked. And she would just laugh. And then one time we were in the store and there was a man with a handicap walking like that. And my daughter's laughing and laughing. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I said, don't laugh, But my dad would do that to make her laugh. So, yeah, he loved the grandkids as well. He loved all his grandchildren.
Tell me about one trip your parents took that really, really impressed them and why.
They went to Israel. Yeah, they got to go to the Holy Land. And I remember Mom, being so touched by it. I don't know what sights they saw, but she was very touched by it. Yeah. And they also went to Panama. So Dad, loving what he did with his mechanics, he was very impressed with the Panama Canal.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I think my parents also visited Panama, if I'm not mistaken. But boy, they sure got around for being humble people from Laredo.
Yeah, and not having much money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they really enjoyed their time. As your parents got older, what were some of the life lessons that you learned from their aging that would help us as we age ourselves?
Dad with his dementia would often, just out of nowhere say something and like, I'm here. Like, he had moments of clarity and he would say, me. And I'd say, oh yeah, what do you want? Do you want something? Yes. So I think they wanted to be heard. They wanted to be seen in their elderly years.
Yeah.
It's real easy for us kids to go in and just take over and not ask them, is this what you really want?
Dr. San Martin and your parents, what kind of connection did the two of them have over the years?
They had a great respect for each other, They were his patients. I'll tell you a real funny story. So one day my brothers called me and they said, Rachel, I was at work. You have to do Dad's eye exam. He almost hit a car today. Oh, okay. Well, bring him now. We'll do his eye exam now. So here comes, I don't know if it was Raul or Javier or David. I think it was David. Brings him over to the office. And so, we do the eye exam. He's 20/20. He doesn't need glasses. He's, fine. And so Roberto tells him, well, I have good news and I have bad news. What do you want to hear first? And he goes, no, I'll tell you the good news first. He goes, the good news is your eyes are perfect. There's nothing wrong. You see 20/20. You don't need glasses except to read if you want them. He goes, the bad news is you're a terrible driver. So, that always stuck with me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, telling my dad that. And he just told him, be careful. Just be careful out there. It's real easy not to see a car coming at you. But probably those were the early dementia days.
Okay.
And that's when it all started. And my mom loved Roberto, and we, when we went to Alaska, they got to know each other even more. And,
When I would see them together at Super Bowl parties, there was almost like this humble style, this humble respect that they had for one another. And it was just really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It was like they were in a calm space and just like the love, you could feel it.
Oh, yeah. They could look at each other and they knew what they wanted. Like she goes, oh, your dad wants me to go over there, And so, yeah, they did. And I'm sure that you saw that in your parents, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. A lot of mutual respect and a lot of love and just happy to be together.
And a level of patience and forgiveness that one does not really see in modern times because, let's face it, life has ups and downs and challenges, and you can't help but respect when people say, hey, we had this big bump in the road, but there's bigger things, so let's move forward. Like, that is something I admire.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I think, going back to saying about how Mom and Dad wanted to be seen, I think that it was a lesson for me that I'd like to pass on to you is that, your mom is still very much herself, just your dad isn't by her side right now.
Yeah.
But everything that he taught her, everything that she learned is still there.
Yeah.
And so treat her as an individual. Treat her as, Mom, you still have wants and needs and desires. So, you know.
For you, Rachel, what have been some of the biggest lessons that others can learn from you about overcoming grief, overcoming sadness, because these things happen in life, but what has helped you?
You know, when Roberto got diagnosed, we decided, okay, no regrets. All the decisions that we made from there on out, we made through prayer and contemplating and discussing and discernment. And we just said, from here on out, it's no regrets. So I would say, live your life, make your decisions with no regrets. Oh, I shoulda, coulda, woulda, but didn't. So, yeah.
And in terms of post death, post transitioning, our loved ones going away, and I'm referring to your parents, Dr. San Martin, what helped you personally after those sad moments?
My faith and the family support, for sure. My siblings and, you know, my parents by that time were gone. So I already knew a lot of the grief between David's death and then my parents. So it was 4 deaths within a 2-year period.
Oh my God.
17 David, 18 mom and dad, and then 19 was Roberto. So, you know, a lot of it was support, talking about it, you know, being able to share my experiences, being able to share what made me happy, what made me sad, the memories, and then living his legacy through our mission. I think you know about the medical mission that I'm involved with.
Yes, you go to Mexico and help.
Go to Oaxaca.
Yes.
Every September, and just carrying on his mission, his legend, because he really is a legend in that ophthalmology community, and it's just such an honor to continue that and to do the work that he started and continue the work that he started and recruit the physicians and, you know, take the glasses and do all year long fundraising and whatever it takes to help the people, you know, that are less fortunate than us.
Love that. Now, if people want to find out more about that, is there a certain web page they can go to in terms of volunteering, supporting, etc.?
I think there's a Facebook page called Quixotes of San Antonio. There's also a QR code, but I have those put away over there. Okay. So there is a QR code. But if you go to the Facebook page or just give me a call, you know, Quixotes of San Antonio, I'm in charge of the ophthalmology department. So we give away glasses. I collect a good pair of glasses. If you have old glasses, readers, sunglasses, I take them, I clean them, adjust them. As long as they're wearable, they'll go to Mexico. And I do that all year long. And so I spread the word, and I have boxes out at different doctor's offices where people can donate. And then read the glasses, clean them up, read the glasses, label them, pack them, and send them.
Super. Awesome. Thank you so much for doing that for the world, right? Because that's right. It's a global operation. Rachel, I wanted to ask you, and this has to do with Catholic mysticism and spirituality that's maybe just out there, supernatural, etc. But have you ever felt, experienced, or sensed our dearly departed, and I'm specifically referring to those 4 amazing individuals who left our world in that 2-year period? Mm-hmm. Do you ever sense their energy, hear voices, anything along those lines?
Yeah. Yes. So last March, I was on a women's retreat, and we were in a chapel praying the rosary, and my mom came to me. Yeah. She was just right there, smiling. Yeah. And so I just said, okay, Mom. You know, a lot of times when their faces come to me, I'll pray for them, or a memory comes to me, I'll pray for them, or I see their picture, say a little prayer. Because the best thing we can do for our dearly departed is to pray for them. Mm-hmm. Can't do anything else. You can't serve them a cup of coffee.
So you're telling me, Rachel, that her image appeared to you?
Yes.
Wow. And I was actually just referring to sensing their energy, but you visually...
I visually saw her. Wow. And in my dreams, my husband comes to me. Yeah. Like he was still there, like we're still working together. Yeah.
That's so powerful, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
And do you think for people who want to experience that, I almost get the feeling that it's through your faith, it's through your Catholicism that takes you to the higher level that you can reach that. Would that be fair to say?
I think people have certain gifts, you know, if they're in tune with them, you know, you can reach that level, not so much through Catholicism, through faith in general, you know, a relationship with God, a relationship with Jesus. I think it's out there for anybody, you know, and I think there are people who have that sense also, that feel the presence of somebody, you know, with them.
Super. Rachel, one final question, and thank you so much for your time this Saturday morning.
Yeah.
In January, my mother had referred to all of my primos, you and all my cousins, as my father's children. And I'm trying to understand that. One family member said that my father was the connection to your parents, but help me grasp what she may have meant there.
So I think that your dad always wanted to keep in touch with us. He always wanted to know what was happening in our lives. And hence the group, you know, the text messaging started. He shared stories. He wanted to see pictures, you know, of travel. And I was so bad about it, not posting pictures. In fact, you know, like yesterday's rodeo picture, I could have posted that on the group. Well, I could still. And just say, hey, you know, this is what I did today. This was fun. This brought me joy. And he wanted to know that. Your dad wanted to know us as individuals, as adults, because he probably knew us as kids. But our personality didn't shine at that time. And, you know, your dad and I talked about traveling. He loved to travel. I loved to travel. So, yeah, I mean, that was a connection that we had, the travel. And I think he wanted to be proud of his family, his Solis children.
Absolutely. One of the highlights that just comes to me right now is, you know, my father attended your 2024 Super Bowl party, which was the first time in many, many years, if ever.
Yeah.
And
it was so good to see him. Really, really was.
And it was, I don't know if I shared the story with you, but after we drove away, well, when it was challenging for him to walk. So
he'd been having some difficult times, right?
Yes.
With his health.
So as he was approaching the house, I sped up and I alerted all of you that he had a special guest, and he came in and y'all greeted him just so beautifully. And it was fascinating because he said afterwards, God, they treated me like I was a superstar.
Celebrity, yeah. I remember he goes, yay, Theo Joe's here. Yeah, I remember standing up and going to greet him. Sure.
It was so cool.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts about family, legacy, and a good piece of advice maybe your mom gave you, your father gave you, or anything else that really carries you forward?
You know, God, family, and country. That's the way we were raised. So I would say, you know, keep those in your heart always, and take care of your mom. You know, there's nothing like having your mom, because once she's gone, and like, you know, with your dad, that's it.
Yeah.
You know, listen to her. Listen to your mom. She's wise in her ways, and she knows a lot.
Super. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for your time this morning and sharing your stories. And I look forward to your fabulous Super Bowl party.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing you.
Thanks, prima.
You're welcome.